Hello and welcome to this brand new podcast series courtesy of the Crossbar. But before we get into it, like the podcast, give us a star rating and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For regular podcast clips, plus this series will be available on full there as well. We're going into extra time to discuss more talking points in depth than we do in our regular podcast episode. And this week we're talking the sacking of Rafael Benitez at Everton. So Brad, Sunday afternoon it comes out that Rafa Benitez gets sacked by the Toffees after Saturday's defeat. We kind of spoke about it on our podcast on Friday, how we said if he was to lose this game, it would be the end of his tenure on Merseyside, and it has come to fruition.
Well, I think the real question is, did anybody actually see this coming? Yes, we did. Yes, of course we did. We all saw this one coming. It was never, ever going to work in a million years. The Liverpool factor was just held over his head right from the start. And that was always a big issue to Everton fans, of course it was going to be. Even the style didn't work. He's just a sort of manager that didn't fit. Yeah,
and then we look even more in depth to like the signings he made in the summer. They just weren't good signings. I mean, Damari Gray and Andres Townsend have had sparks this season, but not consistently enough to say, right, this is good enough to move Everton up the table. And we're not even going to talk about the signing of Solomon Rondon, because that was just a useless signing.
That deserves its own episode in itself.
Yes. I mean, that was just dreadful. But yeah, like you say, from the off, being the fact that he used to manage Liverpool was always going to be on his doorstep as a factor of, like, if anything goes wrong, that people are just going to be blaming the fact that he's doing this in spite of Everton, because of him used to working at Liverpool, rather than it's just like a bad result here and there.
Yeah, and it's in that case it brings up the question of whether it was the right appointment in the first place.
I mean, they went through a good host of names of managers. I think about 4 to 6 names I remember being linked with the job, but I don't personally think Benitez was the right man to take over, not just because of his Liverpool background, but I just don't think his style of play would have worked, and obviously didn't work with Everton.
No, and this is the big talking point with Rafa as well, how it's very much, if you're not in his circle, which is, if you don't gain his trust, he doesn't have the time of day for you, and he pretty much just throws you out.
Yeah, you become cold turkey. And you look at Lucas Digne over the last month and a half of the season, and it's been case in point with that situation.
I was obviously going to bring that example. It's just hard to look past it as the main one, because this is a man who was a top quality player for them, and a week after he's been so open about falling out with the man who's just been sacked. It's a baffling one.
It really is. I mean,
of course, I'm sat here laughing all the way to the bank as an Aston Villa fan who now gets to see him play every single week. We knew we were getting a quality player, and if a decision was made about the manager sooner, then Luca Dean is an Everton player still, probably.
Oh, 100% he's still an Everton player if Rafa is sacked before that transfer goes through, because, like you said, Everton fans know his quality, and he's shown it all over the years. And it's not like he'd really gone down a level this season. It's just, wasn't it? He was out injured and then just didn't earn his way back into the team.
I don't remember, if I'm honest. That's something I'll have to look into, to be honest.
But that whole situation is just really strange as to why that happened all of a sudden, and like he just never seemed to pick him ever again. And like, I think when you isolate a player like that, you're always looking at yourself, and the curtain is always closing on you ever so slightly. I mean, we look at Mourinho, everywhere he's seemingly gone, he's done that to a player, and then shortly after his tenure at a club's been up. So you look at his spell at Real Madrid, he isolates Iker Casillas. Man United, it was the stuff with Paul Pogba. Spurs, obviously more recently with Dele Alli. So it seems to be in the modern game now, if you isolate a player, you can start to be packing your bags really slowly because players will not work for you and your time will end up being shorter than you expect it to be.
All it does is just create further discontent amongst the rest of the dressing room, because then you've got other players getting annoyed that someone they've been teammates with for ages has been treated like that.
Yeah, and it just makes it more easier for a narrative to be written for, play. So if a game goes wrong, it'll be like, oh, well, why didn't Rafa pick Luca Dean here? Or they draw against something and it's like the left back's fault. If Luca Dean was in the team, he wouldn't have done this. So there's always that narrative going to be in place for whenever a performance doesn't go right for Everton.
Yeah, and just to play devil's advocate slightly, I don't agree with this personally, but I'll just put it out there. Is it all Rafa's fault, really? Or do the owners as well have to take some blame? Maybe even some of the players as well.
Yeah, I definitely think Farhad Moshiri needs to look at himself, because there does seem to be a large level of discontent from Everton fans towards Moshiri based on the managers they've had in recent years since David Moyes has left, the signings that they've made in those 9 years or so. They've not gone on and progressed in terms of what people would expect. They've massively regressed over the years.
It also feels slightly... Is it a bit like the blind leading the blind?
Yeah.
Because the owners
I know
don't...
what you mean.
They don't seem to know that much about football, and it's very telling and almost similar to the situation that I have experienced myself with my club.
But isn't that the way...
You were talking about David Moyes as well. Have they actually had a manager who has achieved a good enough level for Everton Football Club since he's gone? Also, we've got that in terms of respect from the fans as well.
No, well, I mean, Roberto Martinez did okay there.
Oh, I've got something to add with Martinez later. Don't worry about it, because I think there's a lot of Everton fans that are out there disagreeing with you in terms of how that one ended.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it ended poorly, but I think he did okay there. Like, I'd say he's probably been their best manager post Moyes. But the
stats will say that, but Everton saw the football, and they were not happy.
And there's a lot of, back to this whole Rafa sacking and the Moshiri thing. It's the thing, though, I think with many clubs nowadays is owners don't buy the clubs to make them better. They see it as, where can we make the most money profit wise, like advertisement and shirt sales and all this, that and the other, rather than coming in for the love of football.
Yeah, and already their effect has been felt on Everton. We've seen it, the transfer windows, the endless spending of money on players that you would never have seen usually sign for Everton as well. New stadium coming.
Yeah.
That's the main one. And
from personal experience, it is needed. I mean, it was, 2017, early 2018, when I went to Goodison Park, and it felt like a stadium in the ruins, and like it's something they needed to be done up, because I don't think, as far as I'm aware, obviously I don't follow Everton that closely, but I don't know whether they've had any like redevelopment done to Goodison Park.
Yeah, that's what the Everton fans to tell us in the comment section, because it's an interesting talking point with that. I quite like Goodison Park. I've never been, but from the outside it seems like a very nice, old traditional ground, and that's again coming from an Aston Villa fan who's got the same sort of stadium quality.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, it definitely has that football heritage feel and like a classic football stadium, but it's one of them where I feel like you can still have that to a football stadium, but have like renovations done to it to make it just that bit more modern to last in modern day society. But back to the sacking of Rafa now. 200 days in charge of Everton, won 7 of the 22 games in charge, 5 draws, 10 defeats. It just really wasn't good enough, and their defeat to Norwich on Saturday was just case in point of how everything has gone wrong for his tenure back on Merseyside.
Yeah, it was so bad. The style clearly didn't work. I don't even know what the style was. Was it just defence first? I know injuries have been a big factor in this as well, which any manager can look at that and go, well, I had all these to deal with.
And obviously his star player Richarlison being out injured was never the best point, and he obviously missed the start of the season due to being away at the Olympic Games, so there's that to contend with. But at the same time, the rest of the players there should have been capable of doing better than what they have done. I mean, sitting in 16th place mid-January for Everton is diabolical standards.
Yeah, and it brings up a question that, because of how bad they've been this season, are Everton slipping into a relegation battle?
I think there's definitely the possibility. Obviously, they've played 2 games less than Watford, who are 18th. But then you look at Burnley, who are rock bottom, and they've played 2 games more than Sean Dyche's side. So there's definitely the capability of they can really fall into it. And one of them, two of the sides below them, so obviously that's including Watford in this conversation, if they go on a bit of form here, Everton really are getting sucked into this relegation battle.
Yeah, they are having to rely on clubs who haven't at any point this season gone on an amazing winning run to then do that, because at the moment they're surviving because there are 3 teams that are much worse than them.
Yeah, and like I genuinely think excuse me, if one of them teams do gonna run for like 4 or 5 games where they pick up like maybe 2 or 3 wins and a couple of draws, and Everton lose in any of their 5 games, we can be looking at them being involved in a serious relegation scrap. Looking towards their next 3 fixtures, they play Aston Villa, then they play Newcastle, and then Leeds United.
Yeah, I actually forgot to mention this in the podcast about that typical, look who they play next.
Yeah.
Because it's the most typical thing for Villa to let the team that needs a boost get that.
Yeah.
I call us the charity, because that's exactly what we are. And God, if there's one, there is an outcome I'm hoping doesn't happen ahead of that game, because I just feel like it will completely revitalise the whole Goodison Park, and the fan base will be so up for the game.
But yeah, it's going to be an interesting month or so. To see who they get in, whether they get in an interim manager or someone permanently, and then performances on the pitch. What happens there going forth?
Yeah, well, we could discuss that later in this episode, but for now I want to stick on owners for that, because they're, of course, we've stated that they're now started to get a lot more pressure put towards them. I remember, it was Watford that lost to them, and there was a lot of the shouting towards the owners who were sat in the stadium, and it got toxic. Yeah,
which obviously is scenes that no fan really wants to be doing. They want to be happy, enjoying the times on the pitch, but I feel like it was something coming. Like it was just a matter of when rather than if. Like these protests rather turned from RAFA and the team's performances on the pitch to Farhad Mashiri and the rest of the board.
Yeah, and it's not just from this season, is it? It builds from seasons prior where bad footballing decisions have been made. Because as much as it's nice to see all the transfers that we made, the big money being spent, finally we're trying to compete, but look who they've spent it on.
Yeah, they've not spent it on quality players to get you the positions they needed to be in, try and involve themselves in a European battle.
If we look at all the signings in the Mashiri era, the only one I can think has really actually delivered for the price that they've paid for them is Richarlison.
Yeah. Like, he's probably been the best piece of business I can think Everton have done in a long time. Like, the rest of them are just C minors, B minors.
Yeah, so much wasted money. Didn't they spend 30 million on Alex Iwobi? Like, you see moments from him, but he's not top quality. He's not even a starter for Everton.
No.
The Bernard signing didn't work out at all when you think about it, because he's gone now.
Yeah.
Where would you start with the James Rodriguez one?
Oh yeah, I mean, that was just absolutely mental signing him, and that just went down the pan later on last season and early into this season before he was sold.
It was doomed to fail the second he set up the Toffees.
Oh, please don't get me started on that when Everton players do that when they sign. But yeah, signings wise, they've just not made any good enough signings to go, hang on, these could actually be a contender for that fourth Champions League place, the Europa League place, and obviously nowadays the Inter-Conference League, or whatever the fuck it's called.
That's how much we care.
Yeah, well, I feel like
if I could add as well, because it always brings up maybe there's FFP problems, because we've seen this season they've scaled back massively in the money spent. They looked at freebies with Andros Townsend. Rondon was a freebie, I believe, as well. And then they spent
next enough, I think.
Yeah, and then it was cut price to get Damari Gray, who has been the only sort of bright spark, even if he's not fully there at this moment in time.
Obviously they got now we're looking at the January window. They got Anwar El Ghazi from Aston Villa in on a loan. They spent a bit on Nathan Patterson, the young defender from Rangers, and I don't know how much they spent on that Vitaly Mikalenko, but yeah, it does seem.
I think that actually was the only one they properly spent money on. Was it in the 20s? I want to say.
Yeah,
maybe just below that, but it's the only one this season they've properly spent a big amount of money on. Patterson was 12 as well.
Yeah, 12 to 15 million it was roughly. So nothing out of the way to make you think, oh, okay, Everton are going to be like trying to spend their way to get back competing. But is that kind of a bit like Spurs? Is they're saving up money for the stadium? Yes, it may also be FFP, but if you think about it, when Spurs moved or were moving to their new stadium, they went a while without spending big on players, didn't they?
They did, and did it work out for them? No, it didn't. They just suffered because of it.
Yeah,
which is the same. Same with us. I remember us, Villa, years ago under Randy Lerner. There was all the money spent, and suddenly it just stopped because there's nothing left. It's the point of throwing money at something that's not working. But then when you stop throwing money at it, it's obviously not going to work.
Yeah, 100%. And we saw the consequences for that with Aston Villa later on in the years. But
I don't want to say it's going to get that bad for Everton, because at this moment in time, it doesn't feel like it would. Like, God forbid if it does for Everton fans, because it will be horrendous. Imagine Everton just not being in the Premier League.
I don't think I could. Right.
No.
To our generation, so those born.
I don't think Everton have ever been. Everton are under one of those clubs who've never been relegated from the Premier League.
Yeah, and like especially, I mean, the older generations than us may remember like the Evertons being up in the title challenges in the 60s and 70s ish, late 50s as well. I think was the last time they won the league. But for our generation, we know them of being that team that are on the cusp of Europe, or when it was around the Intertoto Cup, being involved in that. And I know it's a bit of a repetition, but since the end of the David Moyes era, they've just gone backwards.
Yeah, they have, yeah. I think this is the time then to ask the big question, which is, what's next? Or should we actually say, who's next?
Well, if we are to look at Sky Bets, obviously other betting companies are available.
We don't do that willingly.
Yes. We have a look at the odds for the next manager. Roberto Martinez is the current favourite. I don't see him going back there.
This is baffling. How does this man keep getting linked with jobs when he's in one?
It's always the way, though. I mean, I think, especially in a World Cup year, the Belgium FA don't want him to go. I don't think he would want to go. I think like this is his last chance with this generation of players to do something in a tournament.
Why would he leave the best performing nation in the world?
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks as to why he would go back to Everton. To me, it just doesn't make any sense.
Have you been seeing some of the reaction as well to that?
No,
it's not very good. Let's just say, surely the owners cannot misread what fans think again. Like, can they?
I mean, I think it's something they could easily do.
With how it ended last time, you just think surely they're not going to bring him back again. Everton fans fell out with him.
Yeah, but at the same time, it just wouldn't surprise me.
Do you know what it would be like? I've got an analogy for this. I came up with it.
Go on.
It would be like trying to restart a relationship with someone that you liked, which ended terribly. But then you get back together 10 years later, only to remember straight away that you absolutely despise the way they are and how they act.
Yes. Great analogy, but very much case in point. It could be with Everton. Just having a look down the rest of the list, they've got Duncan Ferguson second, which I think he was going to be interim charge. From what the reports I've read, it's him and Leighton Baines doing it temporarily, at least.
Yeah, I'd like you to give her the rest of the list before I go into detail on some of the options.
Then third on the list is Wayne Rooney. Then we've got Frank Lampard, Graham Potter, Nuno Espirito Santo, Slaven Bilic, and then we'll round it off with Lucien Favre, because there is quite a long list of other people being, and we'd be here until tomorrow going through the rest of the list being linked with the Everton job at the minute.
It's difficult one doing it at this stage because it's not like the manager's going to have the January transfer window to work with as well. When you think about it, if they go for the permanent option, if they go for the interim, then in that case there is only one manager they can go with. But I'll talk about it here at the end, because just for vibes, what if they did go for Wayne Rooney?
I mean, I can see it, and it kind of makes sense, like the whole, he started his career at Everton, he's like an Everton fan and all this, that and the other. But at the same time, you look at what he's doing at Derby, and you want him to finish that work there this season, especially if they can escape.
The neutral wants him to survive with Derby County and pull off the greatest escape ever.
Yeah, 100%.
He hasn't done a bad job with Derby. He's shown a good tactical nous. He's galvanised the bare bones of a squad that actually doesn't know if it's going to exist or not next season. Do you know what it is as well? Thinking about it, it's a bit of a free hit. Yeah. Because it's that thing, and you go for a former player / legend as the manager, and sometimes it can work. But there's so many times we've seen where it's just too soon, and it ends up being a massive risk, given that Wayne Rooney actually doesn't have that much experience.
Yeah, I mean, he's been in the job a year now, full-time manager at Derby County. He's won 18 of the 65 games in charge, drawn 20 and lost 27. So he's got a very similar record to Philip Cocu, who was in charge beforehand. And it's one of them where, does he go in and have this Frank Lampard effect at Chelsea, where he's a club legend and everyone thinks, he can guide us because he knows the club inside out, this, that and the other, and it goes wrong and he'd be sacked within a year? Or could it go down the Ollie effect at Manchester United? Now, obviously, that ended sourly for him, but you look at the rebuilding...
Just say it ended terribly and get it over with.
Okay, it did end terribly there for Ollie. But if you look at the rebuilding process that he did, it did seem to, you saw the betterment in the team and performances in the league. So there's them two options if you go for Wayne Rooney. But at the same time, it's still a big ask for someone this early in their managerial career as him.
To me, it just feels way too soon for that to happen. You want it when there's a minimal risk coming with it. Which for me is why the option, even if it is just to the end of the season, so that in the summer they can refresh a new setup in owners as well, the board. Give it big dunk to the end of the season.
I mean, as a non-Everton fan, you want to see Big Dunk on the touchline again.
Well, even as an Everton fan, I think it's the one they want. If you remember the last time he was in charge, even just as caretaker, didn't they win all 4 games? Like, the whole club was galvanised. He was performing something pretty good with them.
The last one, he won 1 and drew 3, so he was undefeated in the 4 games. But
it's not exactly winning all 4, then, is it?
No, but there was that whole spirit, like you saw the spirits of the club massively lifted when Duncan Ferguson was there, and
which is exactly the worry I have for the next game.
If I remember correctly, one of the draws, or it might have been, it was a late draw against Manchester United. You could see the passion that was coming out of him throughout that whole game, and he knows what it means to be Everton. And like you say, it's the right appointment, but is it the appointment that we will see happen?
There's no risk really with the end of the season. If he looks good, maybe we make the leap and give him full time. If you don't, refresh, as we said, see who's available.
Yeah.
You could even try and convince a Graham Potter if you want.
Yeah. But I'm not too sure what they do, Everton rise going forth.
Yeah, I'm just awaiting we've had all this discussion on the Monday, and when this goes out on the Tuesday, that I've already appointed someone in secret.
I'm hoping that by the time...
We're hoping not, otherwise what's the point of this upload?
Yes. I'm also hoping by the time they play you lot this coming weekend, Big Dunks on the touchline, Saturday afternoon, 12:30 kick-off. You get to see
I'm secretly
Big Dunk.
not. I'm wishing it doesn't happen.
Yeah, but it's definitely going to be something to keep an eye out. Right, I think that is all the talk we've got on this situation this time. This series going forth will be looking at talking points that come across in the world of football in a more in-depth matter than what we do on our podcast. And like we said at the start, the full version of this will be available on our YouTube channel, so make sure you go over there and subscribe. And
the full version will be available everywhere.
Oh, okay. I didn't know what you were going to do with that. But make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel and subscribe to us wherever you listen, whether that be Apple, Spotify, or Acast itself, or any other podcast streaming platform. And make sure you follow us on Twitter at OffTCPod for all the latest news and stories from around the world of football. And until next time, it's goodbye from Brad.
See ya.
And goodbye from me. We'll see you soon.